Committee meeting on September 24th here in the boardroom, starting at 5 p.m. Our prayer and pledge to be handled by Mrs. A.
Thank you, Father, for bringing us here tonight and keeping us safe. We ask that you inspire us with your wisdom and knowledge to make the best decision for our church, for our teachers, our students, for everyone that has their hand in it. And we're just going to go ahead and claim it because we need you. Thank you, Father. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Mr. Moore, roll call.
Yes, sir. Mr. Wallace.
Present.
Mr. Castillo. Here. Ms. Ayers.
Here.
Mr. Brooks. Ms. Gay.
Here.
Mr. O'Banion.
Here.
Mr. Pichon. Mr. Roberts. Dr. Washington.
Present.
Mr. Baumgart.
Here.
Ms. Fontenot. Mr. Hardesty.
Here.
Ms. McReynolds.
Here.
Mr. Natale. Mr. Tarver. You have a floor, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. All right, item number 1 on the agenda is the 24-25 general fund budget revision number 1.
Before I get started, I would like to make one small announcement. Nanette has decided to retire, and so this will be her last meeting with us. And I've hired Lakini Donald to take her place, so she's kind of in training right now. So this is her first meeting.
Congratulations and welcome, and all at the same. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, general fund budget revision number 1 for 24-25 includes revenues and other sources of funds of $382,558,274, which is no change from the original budget, and expenditures and other uses of fund of $367,200,297, an increase of $2,322,408 over the original budget. No problem. No changes to the revenues in this particular budget. And some of the major expenditure increases are $20,000, which is an increase for furniture purchase to replace built-ins at Child Welfare and Attendance Building. $40,750, which is an increase to purchase a 3-year subscription of the BARC software. $10,815, which is an increase due to social studies supplies being omitted from the original budget. And $2,250,443, which is in common rollovers from the previous year, which is really items that we committed to in the previous year's budget, and we just haven't been able to get those things completed yet. And so we just rolled it over to this budget. So that's a normal procedure for us. General fund budget revision number 1 projects a current surplus of $15,353,977, resulting in projected unassigned fund balance of $56,723,702, or 14.83% projected revenues. If you go to the page after that, it's our budget summary, and so just kind of put everything down on the page here as far as where we're at the budget revision number 1. The main thing is the analysis of the general fund reserves. I have adjusted the restricted salary enhancement taxes to the available balances of 24 million plus and 29 million plus. So that adjustment has been made also. The next page is kind of a summary of all the changes that were made in the budget. Again, I highlighted the bigger ones, but this details them all. And again, total of the 23 million, $2,322,408. And with that, I'll take any questions.
All right. We need a motion. Yes, we do need a motion. So moved. All right. All right. All right. So it was moved by Mr. Hardesty, seconded by Dr. Washington, to accept item number 1, 2024-25 general fund budget revision number 1. Are there any questions, any discussion? Anyone have anything? All right. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any nays? Motion carries. Ayes have it. Item number 2. All right. 311 plan. Okay. It was moved by Mr. Hardesty and seconded by Ms. McReynolds, to accept item number 2. All right. Now,
You have any blue cards at that item?
what have you discussed now?
Okay. This item number 2 is Act 311 allocation plan that we needed to come up with as far as some funding that needed to be drawn up for Act 311. And I think I'll let Dr. Van Meter handle that conversation.
All right.
All right, so the initial thought with Act 311 was that we were going to come to you with additional supplements that we would just write right into the salary schedule, right? After surveying the schools, we saw immediately that that was probably not the way we needed to go with this. And the reason is this. The schools have a wide variety, let's say, of clubs, right? Some have no clubs that meet before or after school for a variety of reasons. Others have tons of clubs that meet before or after school. And there wasn't a whole lot of even continuity between how often those clubs met. So for example, you may have beta clubs at some school that meet, 3 times a year after school. You may have some that meet all the time after school. So for us to propose something that says, hey, give beta club X number of dollars would have been very difficult, right? And so then what we came up with was giving the schools an allocation, similar to what we would do for, say, janitorial allocation or for coaching supplements or something like that, where they can then go and divvy those up. There are 2 main ways that we see schools would be able to utilize this, right? One would be to pay supplements to a club sponsor. So let's say, for example, and I think the example I gave you here was, a club sponsor, let's say Beta Club. And we know that those folks are going to do Beta Club and they're going to meet X number of times, and the principal would just give them, say, $200 a year, right? And then all the club's duties associated with that would be encompassed by that. And in order for somebody to do that little pay supplement, we would just have them fill out a little quick form basically saying, I'm agreeing to do Beta Club for $200 a year. And so that way, if they do end up going to Lafayette overnight or whatever with the Beta Club, then it's all covered with that. Does that make sense? The other piece we figured that other folks would be able to use, because for example, there were some of those clubs, or some of those schools, that don't have folks that have after-school clubs. So they wouldn't have to utilize that piece at all. But they do have things that they would have to utilize stuff for hourly work. So for example, you've got buses that are running late, right? And we need somebody to stay there till 5 o'clock, then we're able to pay a teacher. If the administrator can't stay until 5 o'clock and cover it, the teacher wants to do it, then we can have them do it. And then there's a form for that basically says, hey, we're going to do X number of hours, and then this is the pay. Remember that it is $30 net, which means we're figuring up $35 is about what it's going to cost per hour. To be honest with you, and this would also cover folks like if they've got to cover ball games and things like that. We are kind of figuring, since we're figuring on $35 an hour, we had to figure up a number of where to start. This is new for everybody, so we figured up a number of about 100 hours for middle and high and about 60 hours for elementary, right? The logic being that middle and high are going to have after-school activities, and in some cases, the idea was kicked around, well, what about really big schools? Will they need more? In some cases, when we look at big schools, there are some things that they don't need help with. So, for example, where a small school, a small high school, like a Vinton High or DeQuincy High, or even a middle school, they may need more help with some of those extracurricular activities than high schools, than the big high schools. A Barber or Sulphur may be able to cover all of their extracurricular activities because a lot of times they already are, right? They're already paying folks to do that in some of these cases. So because they're a little bit more revenue generating on that side, they didn't, we figured they could be about the same as even a smaller high school or middle school. We are guesstimating on what we're dealing with here because we had to start somewhere, right? And so what we figured was we would be able to allocate these to folks and then be able to watch it too. And so that if we've got somebody who, we could look at it and see that there's justification and we have to address that later, we could. Similar to what we do for coaching supplements, we figured what we would have them do is turn in a plan at the very beginning to their administrative director, because that's one of the first things you have to do as a administrator with coaching supplements is turn in a plan to your administrative director so you kind of know how things are broken down. That's kind of where we are. The grand scheme of things in terms of $3,500 for middle and high schools, $2,100 for elementary schools is going to cost roughly $200,000 a year. So, any amount that we were to increase over those numbers would of course make that $200,000 a year go up. In terms of funding source, that would be up to y'all to decide, but there are basically two funding sources in this case that would be available, and that would be sales tax fund that is for salaries and benefits, as well as general fund. So, questions?
All right, are there any questions? Mr. Castillo?
Yeah, so I mean, I see this like just going from $200,000 to $600,000, just like overnight. Because now those people that are having a meeting during their lunch, they're either gonna wanna get paid during their lunch for having their meeting, or they wanna get paid for having it after school. So I just see this thing just growing infinitely.
Our worry too, Mr. Castillo.
And the state, passed this without any additional funding or any funding mechanism to the parishes that said, hey, you're going to pay someone, but we're not going to give you any money or say you have to do it. So just you deal with it, which is not good. Regarding the athletic programs, that funding should come from the athletic program. I don't see it coming from, it should not have to come from this amount.
Yeah, and I think in many cases, I think you're going to see that it is already. So, for example, if you go to Sulphur High School and you see somebody working the front gate, they're getting paid from Sulphur High Athletics already, and they're going to continue to do that, right? But the problem is, Mr. Castile, if you go to Vinton High School and you see somebody working the front gate, they're not getting paid at all. And if you went to Vinton High football and said, hey, now you've got to pay them to work the front gate, it would be difficult for Mr. Heinen to do that, because they may not be able to cover it out of that. So for example, I was principal at a mid-sized school, and there were some sports I didn't have to worry about, right? Football was always going to pay their gate workers because they had plenty of money to do so. Basketball, sometimes it was a coin flip. And when we had a good team and the gym was packed out, we had no trouble doing that. Most of the time, though, folks worked for free, and volunteered, just because it would have been, we would have gone to the whole football games. It's the same way. That's why, for example, we put middle school in there too, because some of those sports they're not revenue generating, right? And so what is going to be really important for those administrators to do, if we give them a finite amount of money like that, right, is to watch that amount and to do things like, for example, use GoFan. And that way we don't necessarily have to have an employee work in the front gate and have those ticketless deals. And then when we talked to the finance people here in terms of tracking it, because we initially thought about maybe doing it like this won't mean anything to y'all, but we initially talked about doing it kind of like a janitorial allocation, where you just almost like turn in your receipts after. We decided against that. And we decided it would be best to give them the money up front. So it's best to assign, Sulphur High School $3,500 up front, and we can put that in a separate account, basically, within the Sulphur High School budget. And so every month when a principal checks they have to sign off on their financials every month, they're looking at that account every month, and they know how much it is so they can budget. So when they look at that the first month and they see they spent $2,500, they know something's wrong, they got to trim back. Or they know, hey, you know what, I turned my plan in. I was going to spend a big bulk of it like that because I'm paying my supplements to my folks up front, and I don't have a lot of hourly stuff to do. Does that make sense?
And mind you, all that's gotta run through payroll also, so we're giving them the money, but when they hire somebody or we have to pay somebody, then they've gotta send us basically the money back. So we get it at the time that it occurs. We're just gonna give them the flexibility to be able to use it kind of the way that they want to. Now, the board can, if they elect to, they could choose to say, okay, well, we'll provide up to $200,000 and that's it, or whatever is in this plan. We'll give everybody $3,500, $2,100, and that's gonna be it. Anything beyond that, then the school has to come up with, strictly the board's choice. So, but yeah, we had the same concerns that you have, and we talked about it at great length. We just don't know what this is going to be. We've never tracked it before about how many hours people were working at the school. I mean, it's just never been a thing to look at. Because a lot of times there were volunteers working things, sometimes bigger schools could pay. But you start thinking about events like track events, volleyball, softball, baseball, and all the things that the schools do, and the gates and concession stands and those sorts of things. So it's just a number we just don't know. And so we're just gonna give the schools some ability to do some things and provide them some funding. And yes, you're correct, the state mandated this be done, we provided zero funding for it, and just kind of left it in our lap. So,
Regarding athletics, I would just say, you know what, they don't need a brand new shirt every time they turn around. Cut the budget a little bit.
Yeah.
What,
well, they may have to make those
And
decisions.
I'm gonna be straight, I don't really see, in terms of the folks out there, I don't really see athletics taking the bulk of this. I see this being a good amount of hourly stuff and a good amount of club stuff. I think the vast majority of the athletic stuff, they're either gonna be able to handle themselves, or if they go to the GoFan with the ticketless system, they can have parents doing it and not have to have employees. The other option, by the way, in here too, is a voluntary deal, where we've got a voluntary form where there are some folks who just wanna help, right? And we're gonna give them that option too.
what is in place to keep, the principal from giving their buddy or their friend or whomever more money in the beta club that only has, that has the same number of meetings as the student council?
Yeah, good question. So one of the things that we wanted to do too, like I said, is we wanted to make sure that they turned in a plan ahead of time to that administrative director to say, hey, here's my plan of what I'm gonna do with my money. That way there's an accounting. Now, I can't say that it's necessarily wrong for if one club is meeting, lots of times a month and the other club is meeting twice a year. I can't say that it's necessarily wrong for that club that's meeting lots of times a month to get a little bit more money than the other club.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
They're not just meeting, but they're actually doing something.
Tracking,
the club is
absolutely.
supposed to do, which is, give back.
absolutely, 100%.
So is there any, and I don't know if we can do this, or there, when we say band, they have to do, or whatever, maybe they have to do this many events, and do this, and then they're qualified for supplement, basically. Is there anything that says you have to go have a meeting every month, you have to, do something to give back to the community in the fall semester, in the spring semester, or something like that?
We can come up with that if you want, but I can tell you that, like I said, when we survey the clubs that are out there, they're all over the place in terms of when they meet, how often they meet, what they do, even the types of clubs that exist. So that's when we kind of realized it would be awful difficult to regulate from here or from here. How that happens, we're gonna have to do it at the school level.
Too much into the weeds.
Yeah, and have the
We're gonna have to-
administrative. Now, at the same time, you're right, we do need some checks and balances in terms of having those folks turn in that plan to the administrative director so that we can see you've got something to, hey, why is this club getting $900 and this club, all these other clubs getting $100? That seems a little weird.
And also the administrative director with elementary, middle, and high school, now that they're gonna have everybody's plan that they're responsible for, they can also kind of compare them against each other and see too. So again, they're gonna have a plan in place before, we'll go ahead and give them money, things like that, so.
This-
I mean, we're trying to put as much control as we can, but again, it's like you said, it's such a wide variety of what goes on out of the schools, it's kind of hard to put one set of rules down for everybody. It's just, Not practical.
It seems like the state is just opening up a can of worms.
I'm not
disagreeing.
but with that can of worms, we gotta go fishing. So
Correct.
here we are.
This is not back pay, is it?
No,
Like,
no, it is not.
and when does it start? As soon as it's approved, so the
As soon
October?
as we get it approved and we get the plans in.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well,
I mean, in fact, they put this on us this summertime, so I mean, in effect, it should have gone into place on, when we started school, but I mean, we've got the other stuff.
I think it's kind of, we're talking a handful, I want to say a handful of people, because you can't have 5 sponsors for Beta Club, and you don't have 100 clubs in one school, right? Most likely, you may have 10,
Right.
whatever. But, so I think, we don't have a funding source yet, but I'm just gonna throw my opinion out there and hear some feedback, and maybe make an amendment or whatever we need to do. It's not fair to the other 4,000 people that are employed with the school board if we take it from the salary tax. It's not fair to you, it's not fair to y'all, or anyone else. It's not fair to the cafeteria workers, it's not fair to the janitor. I know it's only gonna be, $50, $60, but if you look at the principle of it, it's not fair. So actually, I am gonna go ahead, if I can, and just make it a motion to, have this up to $200,000. And I think there should be a cap of $200,000 on this, and then principals need to figure it out. And if we have to drop clubs, then we have to drop clubs, or people just gonna volunteer. So I make a motion that this $200,000 cap come from the, general fund.
Okay. All right, so it was moved by Mr. Castile to set a $200,000 cap for the 311 allocation from the general fund, and seconded by Mr. O'Bain. All right, now, that opens up discussion. Anyone have discussions or any other questions on this particular motion? Then if it fails, we'll go back to the other motion.
I just need clarification on it. Is this stipend for the sponsor of the club? Because generally, when there's a club, there's a sponsor. If no one shows up to help, the sponsor is there, and they will pull from friends or family to help them get the job done. So we're only speaking of paying the sponsor the stipend.
So what ends up happening, right, is this is for folks who do extra work. That's how this law is designed. If we've got a sponsor, let's say, that is bringing kids to go pick up trash or volunteer somewhere, right? And it's that sponsor that's going, right, then they could either get paid as a pay supplement because they're getting a sponsorship to cover that club. The other option is they're normally meet every day at lunch, right, or twice a week at lunch or whatever, and so they wouldn't need extra to do this anyway. Then what ends up happening is we would be able to pay them by the hour if that's what the option was, because they're only going to pick up trash once in the fall and once in the spring. So, I mean, what we've got is we've got options there, because what we saw when we surveyed the principals is there's variety in what's going on, because there are some folks who don't do clubs before or after school because of a variety of reasons. And so they wouldn't need necessarily much, if any, of the pay supplement portion, but they may need help covering down duty and things like that, they would give those folks the flexibility to do that with this.
Well, see, I'm looking at it from the status of field trips that schools go on. They send out a memo and ask for parent volunteers, and they sign up, and they've been approved, and they go. And I'm looking at the chess club. I know I wouldn't be comfortable transporting children in my vehicle. It has nothing to do with the pay, but now we have these buses.
Sure.
I kind of agree with the $200,000 if it's just for the sponsor, because everybody has their,
Well-
comrades that they can pick up the phone and say, look, I need you to go with me Saturday.
And like I said, what this plan allows the leadership of the school to do is be flexible in terms of what they need, right? And if they need more money on the sponsorship side, they got it. If they need more money on the hourly help side, they got it. Because like I said, when we got to looking at this, it was gonna be very difficult for us to come up with one plan from up here that was gonna fit 60-plus schools.
Well-
And how they operate. But I agree with you.
Then I think, based on the number of clubs on the campus, the allocation should be for the school. Because they know how many clubs and they should spend wisely or get more outside support. So if you put a
Agreed.
limit on the school, how much they're gonna receive for the supplemental allotment, then they just have to spend wisely or beg harder in the
Agreed.
community.
Yes, ma'am, and that's what this does. So when we say $200,000, what that does is that is $3,500 times your middle and high schools, $2,100 times your elementary schools, and then to cover benefits and everything, it comes up to about
I
$200,000.
like that. I could drop some cable services because they would get too high.
Yes, ma'am.
So you
Roger
make
that.
your budget fit your money.
Roger that. That's where we're at. And that's what I hear Mr. Castile saying as well.
Right.
So, and we weren't saying this was unlimited. We were telling you, this was the plan. We had to come up with something because the bottom line is we don't know, just like you said, we don't know where we're going. The state didn't give us any guidance in terms of where we're going. And the plan that I initially thought of, you know what, we're gonna come up with, I'll just get a list of clubs and I'll go to them and come up with clubs and that ain't working. I saw that about 20 minutes of looking at that ain't happening. So, we got a punt. And then we initially, when we started talking about this and then started fleshing out what the logistics of this would look like, this is what we thought is gonna work the best as folks who have been in situations where we've had to spend money, not necessarily in this situation, but in terms of allocations, whether it's coaching stipends or janitorial allocations or whatever it is. So in other words, your principals are used to doing and making decisions like this.
Right. Mr. O'Banion and then Ms. McCarty Reynolds.
Couple things, I know 311 is for certified personnel.
Yes, sir.
I mean, do we have the option to use
I-
support? I mean, I guess that would be their hourly rate with overtime.
So 311 says certificated employees have to be paid at the $30 net. But if we have folks who aren't certificated, we would have to pay them at their hourly rate, is the way I understand it.
That's correct.
And then on supplements, do we have to track the time? I mean, to see how many hours they're putting in, or
So-
how much that supplement pays?
The hourly stuff is supposed to be pre-approved by the principal.
Right.
I mean, if they got a ball game
But I
coming
mean,
up and
do
they
we-
need 4 people for 2 hours, and they know they've got 8 hours, they've got to approve ahead
And
of
I guess
time.
my quick, say it's a $600 supplement. We
Well,
have to track how many hours they work to see.
no, the way we've kind of envisioned this happening, we approve job descriptions and then everybody signs a contract. We're gonna treat these like as separate little contracts essentially. It's not gonna specify the number of hours. It's just basically when we say, this is the job, the club function, basically, this is what you'll do, and this is the pay. However many hours it takes to get that done, that's what gets done. So,
And last thing, you talked about the GoFan, got a lot of complaints about that, but mainly the $3 per transaction. That's if you got a family of 5, they're not so much opposed to a, convenience fee or whatever, but that's.
And understand that we don't set that.
No, I know.
Nor do we get any of that. That all goes straight to them.
And
So,
we kind of, I mean, is there something we could do internally, like, not necessarily start an app, but
well, that's
with our,
basically what you're talking about. You're talking about a pay app that's got to process credit cards and things like that. We just don't have the ability to do We have to go through somebody else to do it.
And the nice thing about GoFan is, that money just shows up in bank accounts the next day.
But I'm
They
just,
handle all that, that's what the $3 is for, to handle it. So,
but I'm just.
But I do hear you, it does get expensive.
Yeah.
But like I said, we as the school board and the school get none of that. That's all to handle the convenience of being able to, have.
And that's optional for the school. We're not mandating
No.
to do it. It's optional at the school.
That could be.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I must have to admit, Mr. O'Banion took all my questions, so
They got,
I got.
he was looking off, he was sitting right next to each other,
That's
looking off the
right.
papers.
Started thinking like,
There you go.
Dr. Washington?
Just a quick question, for elementary schools in interests and opportunities.
Yes, ma'am.
How will this impact those schools? Because I know most schools have maybe 5 clubs.
So they,
I can think of.
it depends on what they choose in interest and opportunities, first of all. And then secondly, that they are, from what I understand, starting to phase that out anyway. So, within the next year or so, that's not gonna be an issue.
Okay,
But I do hear you on that right now, yes.
Yeah.
Um,
and then finally, I did receive a couple of calls from people regarding, having to stay at school with kids. And wanted to know if that would be charged, if transportation would pay for those people to be there, and for special ed meetings, would special ed pay for those certified people? And just wanted to let you know that was being,
Well, if you're talking like special ed to cover down on an IEP,
after hours for IEP meetings that typically may last until 8, 9 o'clock at night, who would pay that teacher for representing,
we could certainly take it as a school out of this fund. We had not talked about transportation or special ed picking up that fund, but that's why we had this available if a school needed, that they could pay hourly.
Are there any other questions? All right, and Mr. Castile, we do have blue cards that will, in just a moment, Mr. Castile is gonna restate his subsidiary motion, and then we'll have blue cards come and speak, and then we'll take it on the item.
So my motion is to basically go along with the staff proposal of the $3,500 for the middle and high schools, the $2,100 for the elementary schools with a cap of $200,000. That's the approximate cost that it's gonna have. But the funding source is to come from the general fund. That's my motion.
Okay, and that motion was obviously moved by Mr. Castile and Mr. O'Banion.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right, and we do have a blue card. The first blue card on this item is Ms. Carrie Johnson. If you would state your address, and you have 5 minutes.
Terry Johnson, 1515 Palermo Drive, Sulphur, Louisiana, President, Southwest Louisiana Federation of Teachers and Support. And I concur with what Mr. Castile has been saying. What I'm hearing is because it seems that some parts of our state are rewriting their job descriptions to include 15 after-school items as job duties of a teacher. And that smacks of not wanting to pay them for all the extras that they do. Also, the funding source had the question marks, but I do agree that the general fund is where it should come from, because the sales tax benefits everyone across the board. Teachers who are certified and support people. And if we start taking out of that fund, that lowers their stipend, which on October 31st, we're getting calls August 1st. How much is our stipend? They count on that money, and it would smack of it would be an affront to our support people because they are not in charge of clubs. They are not the ones that stay after school with kids all the time. And if, just like at Fairview, to give an example, that they have 100 students in the hallway, until 4:00 in the afternoon, 4:30 in the afternoon, because they're on a split bus route. That can't be helped, but that campus is paying teachers, 2 teachers that rotate every day, so not everybody has the same duty, but they're getting paid for their extra time that they're staying. And that's what it's about. So while the discussion was very good, and I know that you're business people and some educators, but I know the legislature threw this at your feet, but we're trying to be as fair as possible. And with our sales tax, can I ask Mr. Bourne, where does the interest go that's collected on the sales tax, that hasn't sales tax?
It stays within the fund.
It stays within the fund. So even that goes to show you that it benefits everyone, okay? And the distribution of the money, it's gonna be a cluster, we know that. And we have greedy people throughout. I'm not saying there's not, but a vast majority of your certified teachers have already volunteered for all the extracurricular activities in exchange for some incentives, which that's great and everything, but with this money, they might change their mind. So I'm concerned how this is gonna work, but I know we have to start somewhere. And basically, I don't want you robbing Peter to pay Paul, is basically what I'm saying. I'm not against any of this, but I do want you to know that you're gonna get phone calls when they find out that the schools have a certain amount of money to spend. And if somebody seems to be getting more, you're gonna hear about that too. And it's true, there's hardly any guardrails on this, Dr. Van Meter. So it's in the principal's hands. I'm not saying that you have to tell a principal what to do, but perhaps some guiding of what this is for would help alleviate some of the thought processes, somebody getting more than I am type situations. They're only human, and everybody's frustrated, and everybody has an agenda, and everybody is just trying to make it to fall break. Thank you for what you're doing, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, our next is Ms. Kathleen Smith. If you would just state your address, I've already stated your name. Thank you.
4702 Edgar Road in Sulphur. And I'm also on staff at Southwest Federation. And I have a few things. I've had a few sleepless nights over this. I know this is not my money, but I worked for the system for 39 years and I have a little input. I want to just ask, how long has it been since CPSB gave a permanent raise to all of its employees? It's been too long. The state of Louisiana has also been neglectful in giving any permanent pay raises to teachers and support employees over the last several years. Instead, thanks to the voting public, 2 sales tax propositions in Calcasieu have passed, and because of this, all, and I repeat, all employees across the board, administrators, teachers, and support personnel have received substantial stipends, which is awesome. No, employees across the board, everybody. There has been no picking and choosing of who receives and who does not receive the money. We normally find out about the stipend early in September, but considering the fiscal year ends in July, this seems too long of a time to know what funds are available for distribution. This year, however, all we have been hearing is crickets regarding the amount of the stipend for CPSB employees. It seems this has a great deal to do with the passing of Act 311. And by what I've heard is like y'all been working tirelessly on this. Totally understand. And the state has failed to fund it. My concern is that it becomes an unfair distribution to move monies for the distribution of monies for Act 311. Not everyone benefits, as Terry said, from the Act 311 money coming from the sales tax. I appreciate that y'all are thinking about monitoring these items very carefully. In addition, more things were added to the job description. We have been getting calls from teachers about the length of the job description. If this was to avoid paying certified teachers the extra money for doing extra, that's how they feel. Another way to avoid following the state law was to offer incentives. Some people are absolutely thrilled about that. But teachers shouldn't be forced to take that instead of the stipend money. Those are just a few of my concerns. I hope that you choose to vote to take the money out of general fund and not a tax that supports everybody in the system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so we have a subsidiary motion on the table, and so I wanted to ask, does anyone need that motion to be repeated? Does anyone need it to be repeated? Everybody good? All right, so we have a motion and a second, and we can take it to vote. All in favor? Oh. Yes, sir, go ahead. Mr.
It's
Cassidy.
okay, based on the comment from the blue card, Fairview's basically swapping out, using two teachers or the split bus routes, so they're using two teachers every day to monitor these 100 kids that are in the hall. So at 180 days, that comes to $12,600. So where does this, that $2,100 is not gonna cover that. So where does this money come from to help these people?
Well, I don't think it's $12,000.
Well, if it's,
We'll have to figure that out. I mean, that's, again, I wasn't aware they were spending, having somebody monitor that much. So, again, we have to start somewhere on this.
no, I agree, I'm just curious.
So as we work with the schools and we find out some other things, I mean, we may have to come back and maybe revisit this issue. I feel certain we will, because again, there's gonna be a lot of situations out there, once we start getting people's plans back, and there may be some other situations that we're unaware of that are going on out there that the principals might need to address on that. So again, we may need to kind of come back to this. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think if it's possible to monitor the hours as Mr. O'Banion had mentioned, as well, so we'll know.
Well, the hourly rate, we're gonna know, because we're gonna have time sheets for that.
That's correct.
Absolutely.
Because, this may be, I want to say it's probably not too.
Trust me, we understand.
But,
Yeah.
I
I feel 100% certain this is not the last time we're gonna talk about this.
agree.
But we have to start somewhere.
Sure, I totally agree.
And it's a whole lot better to start lower in this case and then address those issues, spot issues that we may have to.
And again, as they submit their plans, we're gonna have a much better understanding of what's going on.
Yes, you can kind of say this is like the pilot, but we'll definitely have to come back to the table probably.
Pretty sure this is
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna take vote on the item. Okay, Dr. Washington?
Just one quick question. Based on the comment, is it possible to add some criteria, or would you prefer to get the plan first? To add
What specifically are we talking about?
possible criteria for
Such
the
as?
use of the stipend
So,
for, say, the elementary, middle, high, just.
So, I mean, we do, like we said right here, we have basically two options of ways they can use it. So they can have a stipend for a club or something like that, and that's gonna cover basically a flat fee of what that person's agreed to sponsor a club for. Or we have an hourly rate In each of these cases, we're gonna have to track them differently in terms of the form that's gonna be used to track them, because we have to have approval ahead of time. So there's really only two ways they can use it. Now, in terms of what they're using the hourly rate for, right? To be honest with you, again, it's gonna depend on whatever that school needs. In some cases, you may not have folks that have to deal with, say, a bus split in the afternoon, right? And an administrator's gonna cover down on that. And in some cases, you may not have folks that are gonna be at a middle school volleyball game, and we don't want to use GoFan, so we're paying somebody to work the front gate. So we've got basically a wide variety of things that they can use, but it's the hourly rate that they've got the flexibility to use it for.
All right, so the motion made by Mr. Castile and seconded by Ms. O'Banion. Mr. O'Banion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, motion carries. Ayes have it. All right, item number 3. Middle school cheerleader sponsors supplement.
Dr. Van Meter's going to cover that one as well.
So we were asked to look at the salary supplement for extracurricular sponsors, and specifically look at middle school cheer sponsor, and it was low. It was $560, and looking, there's only a couple things out there that are $560, and they're a good bit less time than middle school cheer sponsor. The other two are Quiz Bowl and debate, if you do the lowest number of debates. So if you do more debates, you've got an opportunity to earn more money. So the suggestion from staff is to raise that supplement from $560 for middle school cheer sponsor to $1,000.
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved by Mr. Hardesty, seconded by Dr. Washington. Are there any questions? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Ayes have it, motion carries. Item number 4, this is informational and discussion.
That's correct. No, it's just information on, I'm happy to answer questions. Attached synopsis of Hurricane Laura FEMA funding status. It's a snapshot in time of where we were on September the 17th. So both the monetary status as well as the current step of each project worksheet. Process remains very fluid. It's important to note that the attached schedule is independent of any actual construction project activity. References to projects or references to the funding projects or PWs and not the actual construction projects. There's a little bit of, right now, I guess the best way to explain it is FEMA is currently under what they refer to as immediate needs funding. Which what that means is that they're not obligating any new projects. Doesn't mean we can't keep working on them. It just means they're not going to fund any new projects. So if we didn't already have something obligated, they're not going to obligate it until basically the government passes either a budget or a continuing resolution effective for October 1st. Heard yesterday that possibly they're going to pass a continuing resolution to continue funding the government. If that happens, then they will basically fire up what they call the DRF, which is the Disaster Relief Fund, and that's where all the funding for all these projects comes from. But right now, all they're doing is the INF, which is the immediate needs funding, which is a hurricane coming, they basically will go in after and provide assistance immediately. That's the only thing they're doing right now. So we're kind of in a standstill right now, getting any new projects done. However, again, they're still working on all the paperwork and getting the projects done so that when the INF is lifted, then they can go forward. It just puts us in a delay pattern. So, going on the second page so far, again, and you've seen some of these numbers before. Right now, that we're estimating our total projected cost on all these things is going to be about $410 million. Excuse me. The emergency worker and permanent worker are going to total to about $391. And if you go to that very last column over there, that's the difference between what the federal share has been determined already and what GOSEP has actually paid us. And so we still have about $76 million that essentially the state has that hasn't been sent to us yet. And so that's kind of in play right now. And then if you go a little further down the page, RFs, and RF stands for Request for Reimbursement Fund. Thank you so much. It's a request for reimbursement form. So we have these about $12 million that's at the state level right now that we're trying to get through their processes after it's already been through FEMA's processes. So I can't emphasize how many processes are involved in getting money. And the last page basically is a list of the projects that we don't have PWs yet. And so there's no obligation on these things just yet. So, again, these are kind of, from an approval standpoint, on pause, but we're still working on them, so we just can't get them approved on it. So that's basically the information where we stand on the hurricane project right now.
All right, that's for informational purposes only. Does anyone have any questions, any comments regarding? All right. Next item on the agenda is adjournment.
So moved.
All right, moved by Mr. Hardesty, seconded by Dr. Washington. All in favor, say aye. Any nays? All right, ayes have it, motion carries, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.